Hello, my name is Jacob Tonson, and welcome back to the Wisdom of Odin. Around 9 months ago, I sold nearly everything I own in order to travel the ancient world. And a lot of you may know this is to make these videos, to explore the ancient religions, to bring them back to you, and to see how it's still practiced today in Europe. And that, for the most part, is every video I've been making over these last 9 months. I've been dedicated to studying and understanding Odin for years now, and I've read nearly everything you can find on Odin. I have looked at every artifact you can find, and I think what really is left is experience. And I think that's what I was really missing, is I wanted to experience more of who Odin was. And so it was in that moment that I was reflecting on sacrifice and what I could sacrifice in order to connect more with Odin, because sacrifice is such a powerful theme of Odin worship and Odin's story. So I really didn't want to give up an eye, but what I really felt called to was giving up stuff, giving up the things I own and start wandering. And so that's what I did. I started making this plan to sell nearly everything I own, and in November I started doing that. I sold basically everything besides 8 boxes of books, and I booked the flights, I made the plan, and I landed in Europe. And then for 9 months I have been wandering. And it's been one of the most life-changing experiences. I feel like I've lived several lifetimes, and let me tell you, it was an amazing way to connect with Odin. And so in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you my revelations about following Odin after making such a sacrifice, and really trying to answer the core of this question of who or what Odin really is, especially when looking outside of the source materials. So it's definitely going to be more of a discussion-based video, but I really hope you enjoy my reflection after making this sacrifice to Odin to understand who he really is. Luckily, I have this beautiful forest behind me, and it's autumn, so it is beautiful. But due to the nature of this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink myself down in the corner here so you can still see me talk. And then I'm going to play for you some of the amazing footage I've captured over these last 9 months. I mean, I've just seen and recorded so many beautiful things. So I'd much rather you look at these beautiful things and me be down here discussing things. And of course, I'll be putting more stuff on the screen for you as well. So I hope you enjoy this format. Let me know if you do or not. So let's talk about source material first, because this is something that is important to understand, and it's what I had as an American. We don't really have the artifacts here to look into. We don't really have the museums to go to. We can't go to the things named after Odin. And it's just really hard to find information when it comes to Norse pagan subjects, and so we go to books here in America, and I was just like everybody else. And so I have a really long video discussing Odin, and it's about an hour long, and it's all the times that Odin was mentioned within the Poetic and Prose Edda. It's an hour long because he is mentioned a lot. But when looking back at these various stories, I really think you can lay them out into 4 main sections of Odin's life. You can look at his beginning, his middle, and his ending times, and they break down really nicely. So I kind of want to go through them because I think there's a lot to learn in here, especially after reflecting and studying these materials so much. And so within the Prose Edda, I think this is where we see the younger days of Odin. So this is when he was born, when he kills Ymir with his brothers, and he creates Midgard. And so it's after this time period that we see this kind of period of wandering with Odin and the Wanderers 3, as I'm calling it, or the Wanderers 2, if you add that together. But the Wanderers 3 sounds nicer. So Odin and the Wanderers 3 are traveling across Midgard and exploring this new place. And so this is where we see Odin and a changing group of 2 other individuals traveling around Midgard and exploring this new world and interacting with the beings that live here. And so I see this as a young story because we stop seeing these other 2 figures mentioned. These other 2 figures are usually float between Villian Ve or Honir and Laufnir, forgetting I'll put on the screen. But basically you see these wanderers exploring this new realm. And so you hear a story in the Prose Edda that is really interesting. It's Odin, I believe Loki's involved in the story as well as Honir. And there's like an otter, they kill it, and they have to make up for killing this otter, and then Loki has to go get this golden ring that's kind of like the Lord of the Rings ring. But you see these kind of misadventures that happen. And then, of course, we also have the story of Odin Villian Ve, or the other 2 traveling on the beach and creating humanity. So we see a lot of younger stories. I also personally see this as where the Aesir and Vanir War happened, because this feels like an earlier event. It's before the 2 tribes of gods came together. This is when the worlds started clashing. And so this is also when you see the hostage exchange, and then, of course, Mimir's beheading as well. And so I think this is kind of what is contained in the early years of Odin. He's young, he's brash, he's a warrior. These are the warrior years of Odin, the younger years. It's after the Aesir-Vanir War that I think Odin slows down, because Asgard gets established. You have the Aesir and the Vanir gods living together in peace, and you have more roots being formed within the tribes. And so I think this is when Odin kind of gets bored and restless. This is where you get a lot of the stories in the Poetic Edda of Odin just like challenging people to wisdom-spewing matches. This is also when I think Odin becomes obsessed with gathering knowledge, with wandering around and trying to see what he can gain far as wisdom. This is when Freya teaches Odin Seidr magic. This is also when I believe Odin spent time as a witch, birthing children, understanding Seidr magic, because my personal understanding of Seidr magic is that you have to understand the women's magic, you have to understand the women's cycles, biology, giving birth, going through menstruation, and so Odin needed to do these things in order to gain more wisdom, so he became a woman in order to understand Seidr magic. As long as editing Jacob's doing his job, I'm also putting the stories I believe are contained in these years. So we've already talked about the warrior, we're on the wandering years, and I think the stories of Grimnismal, Vafthrûsnismal, and Harbits the Old are also all contained in this as well, because we see the wisdom really come into play here. Odin challenging people to wisdom, to these wisdom battles, and even arguing with his son Thor over wisdom and insults, and then Grimnismal's when he's sitting on the throne with Frigg. And I think he's getting bored, and they're playing games with humanity, and then he goes down to play these games. So again, I think we see Odin being bored and wanting to gather wisdom all in these wandering years. So what I believe enters this next phase. So you have the warrior, the wanderer, and then the next phase of Odin is the father, and this is when Balder is born. And so we don't have a lot of stories surviving here. It's mostly contained when Balder dies. But the moment Balder is born, I think this boredom is kind of over, and Odin enters his father's stage because he loves Balder so much. He's had other children up to this point, but not loved them as much. I mean, look how he treated Thor and Harbits the Old, yelling and insulting his son. But when Balder was born, it was different. And so I think this made, just like in real life, when someone has a child they truly love like this, it changes them. They have to slow down. They can't take as many risks, and they care so deeply about this child. And so Odin becomes obsessed with preserving life, and he becomes paranoid at the same time. Which I think this is something that happens later in our lives when we enter our twilight years, is we start getting paranoid about death, about the end of time, about the end of our time, and the life and safety of our family and our loved ones. So this is where I think we have the story of Baldur's Drama, obviously the prophecy of Baldur's death. I think this is where we have Lokasenna, because we see Odin, hiding away in his hall, and Loki coming in and insulting. This is definitely a closer to Ragnarok event. But I also think this is where we get the most famous Odin story. I think this is where the Havamal comes from, because Odin has already had his adventures. He's already gone through the warrior phase, the wanderer phase. And in the Havamal, he's giving his knowledge to people, to Lothfafnir, and to the people who listen, and to us reading these words now in our time. Because you definitely see in Havamal a much more aged Odin looking back like a grandfather, like a father, making sure that the younger generation knows what he's learned in his life. And again, hopefully you're seeing this whole story of Odin's life is a reflection of our own lives. Again, we're young and brash in our younger years. We make mistakes. And then when we reach those middle years, we're trying to explore who we are. We're exploring the world, and we get bored. Honestly, and our adulthood is boring at times. We have to go through the paces. And so we seek adventure, we seek excitement. And then finally, once we start settling down, we have children, or we get into a settled life, we do slow down, and we reflect more on giving knowledge and giving back. And I think we also get a little paranoid as well to what comes after. And this, of course, enters into the final years. I don't think there's a lot of stories here to look into besides Völuspá and the prophecy of death. And so we have the end of Odin's life. And no matter what a god did, he could not escape death. And I think, of course, that is one of the most powerful lessons for us as humans, is that no matter what we do in life, no matter what cream we rub on our face or what we do, we will eventually die. And the only thing you can do is when that fated day comes, you ride boldly into it, and you meet your fated end, just like the god Odin. So hopefully this all makes sense, the way I've kind of broke this down. I've always seen Odin's life and the prose and poetic Edda into this timeline of events, and Odin is part of that entire timeline, from the very beginning to the very end. And just like I said, I think it's really reflective of our own lives, and so I do think that we can look at our own lives in these stages of Odin's life. But also I think it ties with the seasons as well. The springtime goes really closely with the warrior. It's big, it's bold, it's beautiful, but eventually it must go to summer, which is long, sometimes boring, but full of hard work. and then autumn you start settling down, you put your scarf on, you go inside your warm house, and you start having conversations, you start sharing things. It's a beautiful time as well, but ultimately it's the time of your life ending. Hello. And then, of course, you have winter, my favorite time of year, when the beauty of the world begins to slowly die and we descend into darkness and we all meet our end. But eventually, spring comes again. And I think that's the cycle of life, the cycle of the seasons can all be seen in Odin's existence as well. All right, that was a lot of distilling information. It's really hard to break down Odin as far as the source material into a cohesive conversation where you don't get bored. So I hope you're enjoying these beautiful images that I'm showing you. Editing Jacob, put that away. Editing Jacob, I swear to God, I swear to Odin, put that video away. It was too cold. You know there's nothing to show off. Okay, thank you. Editing Jacob can be a dick sometimes because he gets bored, and so he likes to play games with filming Jacob. I just like to have some fun. I had footage of me doing this, so why not use it? So anyways, this is a good point to transition over into what I've learned. So source material, but there's a lot to learn there. And now, what have I learned in my wanderings? But before we get there, remember that I wouldn't be able to have done any of this if it wasn't for the amazing people on Patreon and now YouTube members as well. I've tried to make it easier for you to support this channel. Literally right next to the subscribe button, you hit join and you get all the same benefits as Patreon. And so truly, without the amazing support of the people on this channel, this video would never exist. I would have never had this opportunity that I'm so grateful for to wander for these 9 months and to learn and reflect on Odin. So this video is a direct result of the amazing people who support this channel. So if you want to be one of those amazing people, please head over to Patreon or hit that join button. It means so much. I thank you from the bottom of my heart to be able to take this amazing time to reflect on the subjects such as Odin. So I hope this video is a good return on that investment for the people who do support this channel. But with that, let us reflect on wandering. So to start off, there are many people who actually do comment on my videos. I think usually Christians who say, well, if your gods died, if you have stories of them dying, why do you still worship them? Well, I would usually return with the Christians with, well, you still honor Jesus even though he died. If you look at it literally, like let's say Odin was real, he walked this earth, and he died 100, 200,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, whatever. There's still an archetype to look into. And I think a lot of people view paganism like this, is you're just worshiping archetypes to connect to a deeper self. And so the archetype of the warrior, the wanderer, the father, and the old man, I think you can connect with him because he's one of the most complex mythological figures in all of global mythology. I mean, he's got 208 names or something like that, or more than that. And, you know, there's just so many different aspects to call to. And so you can learn from Odin just by venerating him, just by looking at his stories. But I think you have to look at it from the spiritual side and not the literal side of the understanding that there is a spiritual world, a non-visible world that exists alongside of ours, where the spirits of the trees, of the forests, of the sea, and the gods live above us. You know, this kind of shamanic look at everything, that our ancestors are below us in the underworld, that the gods are above us in the upper realm and in Asgard, and that the spirits are all around me right now. We just can't visibly see them, or we've lost the ability to see them. And that's how I choose to view things. Not into this literal, even though I do believe archetypes are important. I think you can learn a lot from the archetype of Odin. But I think when it comes to the spiritual world, that's where, of course, Odin exists still now, and we can interact with him. And these are all things you've probably heard before. But I do have something that I think will be new to you. And it's my belief and my complete understanding, I'm almost 100% behind this now, is how I interpret and understand Odin, is that Odin is intuition. Intuition is that gut feeling that guides us through our life. And intuition is something that isn't great at first. It gets us into trouble a lot, especially in our younger years. We make mistakes by following our gut feeling, but also we have amazing adventures when we're younger by following this gut feeling. And so I think it's something that becomes better over time. It becomes more experienced. And something that I really noticed on my wanderings is following my intuition. You know, may have, at first, were kind of like a struggle. It wasn't something that I was finally tuned yet. But by the point I'm at now, I feel like I can trust my gut. I can feel like I can trust my intuition so much because I've had all these experiences, because I've met so many people, because I've gone through suffering, because I've, gone through this transition in life. My intuition, I just like, holy crap. Like, I feel it, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to do that now. And I don't regret it, like, hardly ever anymore. I follow that gut feeling. And I find myself, after following this intuition, this is when I feel the most connected to Odin, This is when I feel most grateful for Odin, is when I feel connected to my intuition, and I just follow it. And so I think, I'm, almost 30. And so 10 more years, 20 more years, holy shit, how's intuition going to be in 20 years? And I think this intuition is also how you can seem wise. You come to someone who is, seen as wise, and you're like, you ask advice, and they usually give you simple answers. I've met, wise people in my travels, and, I ask them questions, and they don't give me these essays for answers. They give me very, very simple directions, and yet it comes off as wise because it's true. And it's because their intuition, their wisdom has become, through experience, through pain, through hardship, and through following their intuition, seems wise. And it's something that they can rely on and something they trust. And oftentimes, intuition comes in very simple ways. And so I think as we get older and we enter those twilight years, such as Odin, such as the Have-em-all years, his intuition was so true and so honed that his wisdom was so vast and could be so trusted. And so I think in our own lives we see that as well. But it's only through experience that our intuition can grow. It's very rare that we're born with a good intuition. 99% of everyone is not going to be born, wise and intuitive. It's something that you have to go through experiences in life in order to hone, in order to sharpen that axe of intuition. And so I think through those sacrifices, a key theme in Odin, you have to make those sacrifices in order to connect and grow your intuition to the point of wisdom. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the way I did it. And that's the amazingly beautiful part of Odin, is there's several ways to do this. For some people, that's going to be the warrior path. It's going to be joining the military. You're going to get a whole different set of intuition that I will never get because I've never taken that path. But not everyone's going to be able to sacrifice like me and give up everything and travel the world. And so my intuition is going to be different and seen in different ways. But the intuition of a father or a mother is going to be different as well. One of my best friends just had a child, and you can see the motherly intuition begin to grow and begin to change, and something that you can trust because she's had this child now. And so I think there's many different ways to grow and hone your intuition, but I think all of them require sacrifice. To be a warrior requires sacrifice. To be a mother, to be a father requires sacrifice. So sacrifice is the key term. So sacrifice to experience to intuition. I think I've honed in that enough. I just want to make sure I get my point across because as soon as this hit me, a couple of months ago when I started thinking about this video, is that holy crap, Odin is intuition. I still believe in the spiritual component. I still believe that Odin exists in the spiritual world that we can connect with. But how he interacts with you and I is through this intuition, and then through ritual ecstasy as well. And so that's something I hope to continue to pursue. And of course, you can look at a band like Heilung and Allfather Heitir and see that ritual ecstasy in performance. So I have learned a lot, I feel like, in 9 months. And this is my way to share it with you in this video. So please let me know down below what your thoughts are. If you like my theories on Odin, what your experience with Odin, what your sacrifice with Odin was, let me know down below. I'd love to hear it, and I'm sure other people would love to hear from it. This last year is how I've connected to Odin, reading the source material and understanding that, but also making the sacrifice and taking that leap and getting out there and experiencing the world and wandering. All to gather what I need to understand what the wisdom of Odin truly is. You see what I did there? The name of the channel is The Wisdom of Odin.